You might find yourself in a morally tricky scenario and ask the following questions. What ought I to do? What do I owe people? You might have moral commands in mind like, I shouldn't eat other beings if it creates suffering. I shouldn't lie if I can get caught. I shouldn't be a hypocrite if others will judge me for it. These are conditional commands, or hypothetical imperatives. They tell us what is impermissible or permissible, conditional on some end. If I want to achieve some end, then I do some course of action as a means. But Kant thinks that ethical theory should be based on duties or imperatives that are non-conditional and universal. In this way, Kant is transforming the way we justify what is good and what is bad. He thinks that there are moral laws that each person can reason to, and these laws are not governed by our inclinations and consequentialist thinking. In this two-part lecture, we'll be looking at Kant's rational standard to figure out what is morally permissible and impermissible. But before we start this, let's take a look at a crucial element in Kant's theory. We start with a person. People are guided to action, sometimes by other people, sometimes by something internal, like an internal beat that keeps us on track, the person's will. In simple terms, the will is a rationally guided faculty that decides a course of action according to some principle. Subjective principles of the will that motivate us to act are called maxims. The form of a maxim is, in some circumstance, I will act in some way in order to realize or produce some end. Something important to note is that when we act, there are things that we can't control. For example, we might want to do something good, but end up doing something bad, or vice versa. But we can control the will behind the actions. So moral worth is not derived from consequence, but from the principle of the will. For Kant, the only thing that is good without qualification is the good will. What makes a good person good is having a will that is in a certain way determined by, or makes its decisions on the basis of, the moral law. We'll talk about this in part 2 of the lecture. For now, this means that the will makes its decisions based on objective principles, or duties, even if they conflict with certain desires. These desires include strong desires, like the desire for happiness, and the desire to avoid danger. Kant thinks that goodness can't arise from doing things out of impulse or natural inclination. For example, for Kant, true love is not a passionate or emotional love, which he calls pathological. It is a love that one may be repelled by. It may give one an unconquerable aversion, but one loves out of duty. In the next lecture, we'll take a look at the basis of the moral law. The will is the author of the law that binds it. We'll see that morality requires duty, which requires a lot of rational thinking, overcoming inclinations and consequences, and a lot of self-control.